Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. It's great to have you. My name is Camille PÈNE. I'm a co-founder of Les Augures. And this is Romane Clément. Can you hear me as well? Excellent. I can't hear myself, but whatever. All right, we're going to tell you about a research program that we pilot together. It's called the Augures Lab, Responsible Digital Actions, where we support professionals of the digital world to rethink their activities to become more eco-friendly. And we're going to give you, of course, a little bit of context about why it is that we need such a program, why it is that digital activities are not eco-friendly right now, and of course we're going to tell you about the technologies and the prototypes that have been developed up to December 2022. Actually, we're going to tell you about 2 of the 4 prototypes because we don't have time to cover all of them. But all the data and all the work that has been carried out with our partner institutions are available. It's an open source document that you can download. We'll give you the link at the end of our presentation. And here we're going to be using the report that came from this workshop. First, here you have the names of the many partner institutions that we worked with. And for those of you who've already heard the reporting from this workshop, of course, this is nothing new. But first, let me tell you why it's important to talk about digital issues and eco-responsibility, but also health issues and political issues. In 2022, digital activities make up about 4% of all greenhouse gases emissions. So it's not that impressive, 4%. What is really interesting to look at is that the projection for this ratio is that in 2025 it will be 8% of greenhouse gases. Same thing for power consumption, because of course using your devices uses up electricity. And we need to be able to bring that curve down, to flatten it. And we want externalities to be taken into account, and we want to go from the black curve to the green curve and to limit it to 5% by 2025. And in the cultural sector, but also in other sectors, it can be very difficult because there's a lot of expectations when it comes to innovation. So everyone wants to have digital activities and no one wants to think about the externalities. Digital action today, it's seen as something that is intangible, immaterial, automatic. People think, I'm going to put my data in the cloud. And the cloud, what's a cloud? It's something that you can go through in your imagination, because in real life it's a lot of data centers, it's a lot of power, a lot of water to cool them down, etc. So I took this picture here of the Turkish automaton. You know, it's a chess-playing automaton that toured Europe in the 18th century, and everyone thought, wow, that's wonderful, that's such innovation, but actually there was someone in the box. It's not an actual automaton. So it was someone who was experiencing very difficult conditions to be able to give the illusion of having something that was automatic. And that's the problem that we have today. There are externalities that we need to be aware of. We need to understand what they are and how to control them. I was talking about power consumption. The black dot, the black circle in the middle, is the share of digital usage as a share of electricity consumption. And it will increase by 25% by 2030. Greenhouse gases in digital activities are shown there. Devices make up 83% and use is 17%. Worldwide, it's very different. Use is 56% and devices 44%. Why is that? Well, that's because in France we have low carbon electricity because a lot of it comes from nuclear power plants. So devices, your phone, your computer, your tablets, and all the devices that we use in the cultural world, we need to work on that. Because where you have 2 kilograms of devices, to make them, you need 1,500 liters of water, 240 kilograms of chemicals. And this is a representation of an open-air mine. And you can see a ball of copper in the middle. And as you can see, you had to strip out all the land to just get to that amount of copper. I think it's an excellent visual representation of everything you have to do to get to those metals. So when you have VR headsets, for example, or other devices, this has a high cost for the environment. And this investment is not longer term. And we won't be able to churn them out forever because we don't have enough rare earth, we don't have enough energy to mine the rare earth that we need, etc. So I've been talking about electricity a lot and rare earth as well. But when you talk about the environment and those devices, you also need to think in terms of preserving water, forests, other resources, biodiversity. It's also about user experience and preserving the cognitive health of users. Some studies show that the cognitive attention that is necessary for some of these devices is very high. So do we want to find some other alternatives that would be less tiring to the cognitive functions of our users? That's one of the questions that we like to ask. So today there are a lot of promises, all digital mediation, virtual reality, NFT, metaverses. All of that does not mean that those options are bad or that they have to be eliminated, but we need to think about them. And when you're aware of everything that is needed in ecological terms, in political terms, because of course it's also a dependency to big companies like the GAFA companies. When you think about that, you realize that you really need to make informed choices. And Camille will now tell us about the cultural aspects of these issues. Yes, digital issues are to be taken into account, of course, with a view to the consumption of different resources, including abiotic resources. But what about the cultural world as a professional space? Why do we need to look at that? The first thing is, I'm basing my presentation there on the data project and the low-carbon culture study that showed the impacts in the cultural world of those resources and this resource consumption. We've seen that the cultural consumption and the leisure consumption is in France the third biggest consumer of mobility, meaning that that's the third reason why people move about. And if you look at those figures here, this is what people use the internet for. So you can see that there's 15% for Netflix, 9% for PlayStation, Xbox, etc. A big chunk of it for pornography. We can have an open discussion whether that's cultural or not. VOD for 15%. But in general, cultural consumption makes up for a lot of the bandwidth that is used. So again, this is not just about the devices and the impact of manufacturing devices on the environment and on resources. Beyond that, there's also this use of power and usage in general. And this articulates together in such a way that when you have more usage, this creates pressure on the infrastructure. And then you will have a new offer for devices and infrastructure. And when you have better infrastructure, then you will develop a better offer that will have an even higher consumption of power, etc. So this is a vicious circle. And culture is at the center of this vicious circle. So today, the professionals of the cultural world have to think about that. If you're here today, suppose that you are yourself active in the cultural world, in an art center, in a museum maybe, or other kinds of structures. And I'm sure that you absolutely know this tension that we have, because our world is consuming more and more digital content, and our cultural practices have evolved around that. And there's a lot of competition with Netflix, for example, to be able to captivate our audience. There's a lot of public funds that also have been dedicated to pushing the cultural offer of many different institutions. And we want to be able to take our responsibilities in the green transition at the same time. So we need to be able to capture our audience and to be more eco-friendly at the same time. So that's a real tension. And Romane just told us about the ecological impact of the digital activities. But it's not just that, it's also political impacts, it's the dependency to GAFAM companies, and of course the destructive cognitive effects on some audiences that are already overexposed to this kind of newer contents and materials. So this is what we work on. But how do we do that? When talking about digital activities in the cultural world, it's very broad. And it started in the 1980s with the first devices in the Cité des Sciences in '86, for example. And then in the 2000s, the iPhone was put to the market and many apps were developed. Today, there is an increasing temptation to turn to Web3 apps. There are NFTs. So there's really an escalation in the offer. And there's always this promise that we will be able to discover the art in another way, that we will include newer audiences, etc. So we always have the same promises with different solutions that all go in the same direction. But we never solve the issue. So what are we trying to do at Les Augures? Well, we try to find a new stance towards this issue, to slow down and to try and decide to tackle this issue in a very different way, in a more reasonable manner, with a responsible approach, working with our stakeholders, and sometimes simply saying no to some different tools, to the overconsumption of digital options. And instead, we'll try to find joint solutions and, again, decide to slow down and avoid over-communication.
So here are a few images to give you an idea of what we're doing at Augures Lab. To begin with, it's about people working together. So, what do we do at our labs? Well, let me say a bit about who we are. So, I'm one of the founders of the collective. It was founded in 2021 as an association. We have 4 consultants who work with art centers and museums, performing arts, and the concert halls, etc. And we organize workshops for them around responsible digital technologies. And we work with other experts, including Control S. So I'm here for Control S Studio, who will be speaking at the next roundtable on immersive technologies. And so we are a design and innovation studio with the aim of a more sustainable digital technologies. We work with companies, we work with higher education, organizations, and so and we do production as well. So it goes from the engineering tech side through sociology and the design. We have a special design team and various strategies that, such as SNCF, the French Postal Services, the railway system, and other French public services. So there's a real complementary, good synergy in our expertise. But what we're working on together is to defend certain values. Given the challenges of the ecological transition, while we are convinced that experimentation is important and that is the best way forward, working collectively to try to arrive at a more frugal usage of digital technologies, so based on sharing of resources, for example. So you can see that everything that is produced in this context is put on the Creative, is a document under license with the Creative Commons. So we have all of these different experts working with us. Florian is here with us, who run the various workshops. So what is this? Well, it was started with an 8-month project with a specific research action methodology to begin to develop some prototypes to address specific problems connected with sustainable digital technologies. So from May through December, well, we had our first group working together. And then we began to work with institutions and local authorities to develop a methodology to feed into our work. So out of our 21 members, partners, we had financing from the Ministry of Culture, and then you can see some of the various establishments that worked with us on the screen. They're all French institutions. Some of them are run by the local authorities, such as Bordeaux and Lille cultural departments. So it's not just Parisian, although it's true that we often meet in Paris. But in any case, the desire is to work together to rethink our digital strategies. And we work with heads of communication, of visitor services, of the IT departments, all different types of participants in these workshops. But in any case, they are involved in the visitor experience. We've also worked with the art schools so that we can begin training the future culture professionals. Now, in terms of the financing, there was a membership income from membership and support from the Ministry of Culture. So it's a research action program with iterative loops to develop prototypes. But Romane will say more about that. So our design method, we do a design sprint across 1 week, but we adapted it to our particular project. So it's a design sociology and a study of controversy we added. So what are the phases? First of all, setting the problem. Working with Camille, so there was infrastructure and usage of digital technology, communication mediation, and third theme, Well, we changed mid-track. I think it was, well, there was innovation, and then we added training in art schools. So first of all, we discussed what are the key issues. So this is phase one. So we were asking all of these professionals what their main challenges were. So we all met together to discuss that. Then, on the next phase, we begin an in-depth study using the social sciences. So we're not talking about marketing and satisfaction surveys. We really want to do in-depth interviews with professionals and with visitors, and also based on academic studies. Then phase three, developing of ideas, ideation. So we come back with our first results and begin to try to identify some avenues for action to come up with solutions. And so then to see ways where we could develop some prototypes to allow these professionals to go back to their institutions with some ideas for how to reduce the impact of their digital technologies. Then in phase four, we're in the prototyping of the solutions, doing some beta projects. And then phase five, restitution and dissemination. Here we go to the Ministry of Culture, where we present our works there, but to other culture professionals, with some people on site and others following the conference remotely. And so we wind up at the end with 4 tools evolved out of that. I'll just present a few of these to try to show you what emerges from this work of collective intelligence. And also, I forgot to mention, during the 8 months, we created a specific space for a gathering. We also had full documentation, including the list of participants. There was a forum space, documentation. So also, we did a lot of literature review and media reviews on the topic, and the administrative side. So everyone could find all of this information on the portal. So let's look at that first issue, the infrastructure, and then mediation. And I'll give you a link at the end so that you can have a look at some of the different prototypes. Really, at the heart of the project was to develop tools for professionals. And you'll have links at the end of the presentation. So these are prototypes. They're not perfected yet, but they are operational and respond to some of the issues that were highlighted in the discussions. So the first topic was digital infrastructure. And so the main issue raised by the participants was how to ensure that you've got a sustainable digital infrastructure thanks to pooling of efforts or a creation of commons, etc. So we know that, be it in the culture sector or others, the idea is to extend the duration, the life cycle of the equipment, to buy as little as possible, take care of it so that it lasts as long as possible, so really to optimize its usage. So this question around the equipment and the infrastructure was the first topic that we wanted to cover. And what we did was we created a resource center, a platform for loans and donations of equipment, not digital equipment like computers, but rather something specific to art exhibits or cultural exhibits. In fact, in fact, if it's property of public museums, well, there are lots of rules and regulations about what can be done with that equipment. But there was no real platform to give a second life to this equipment, you know, screens, projectors, and that type of equipment that it is allowed to donate, to give them to associations. So we had to draw up an inventory, create a platform so that cultural institutions could put that together. Now, there's a great variety of equipment as well. A place like Universcience or the Museum, very large museums have very large digital teams, and they produce high-level multimedia exhibits, have a lot of equipment, whereas museums that have a lesser budget or less expertise or simply don't give as much priority to it, have less equipment. So this was the idea of being able to have a better sharing of the equipment. But first of all is to avoid the smaller institutions from having to purchase equipment that they wouldn't make much use of. And so we needed the help of the experts in exhibits to tell us what type of equipment they have. So what we did was we developed, well, a table, something of it looks like a back office of the equipment necessary for an exhibit, and to list all of the different types of equipment. But there's also services, not just equipment. There's printing equipment as well. So for this prototype, the Ministry of Culture has decided to develop it themselves. And so the prototype hasn't been developed yet, but hopefully within 6 months, this tool will be available to all cultural institutions. So what was important in the work here was to understand some of the legalities, particularly in France. As I told you, there are laws. A public institution cannot loan or give its equipment outside of this particular framework. So how could we ensure that this platform of resources could serve the general interest and not be open to private players? So there would have to be a certain guarantee that it was a pooling of this equipment, and the Ministry of Culture would be in charge of monitoring the usage. Now let me hand over to Romane on the question of mediation and innovation. So that's number 3. So you know, we've talked about the frugality. How can we develop a collective, sustainable approach for the cultural center using technological innovations? So in concrete terms, for each of these challenges, we conducted a field survey. In this case, it was 3 months of interviews, and what we observed is that, well, we hear a lot about what cultural institutions can do with technological innovations, but in fact, not many institutions make use of these technologies, in fact. And so And so fundamentally, things haven't changed very much in their usage. So what was important to us was also to understand their usage, because we know that you're not using the same types of technologies if the purpose is for conservation as it is for access to visitors. And so we drew up various observations, and in particular the fourth observation, digital frugality, how to make this operational. You know, the Louvre, for example, rarely considers its IT usage as a problem, and yet it can be. So what did we do? We developed a handbook or guidelines so that museums could rethink their the visitor experience through mediation. But in fact, the question of sustainability is really right there, and sometimes it's the low-tech solution can actually be more appealing to certain types of visitors. So the solution here could take various forms. So there was a white book known as How to Recreate Enchantment in Cultural Mediation Using Low Tech. And if you're going to use technology to make enlightened choices, and so not just based on many of the promises of the tech companies. So to help museums and cultural institutions to take many different aspects into consideration before making their choice. So here you've got a few images from that guidebook. We also did posters. So, and then we also drew up decision trees, decision-making trees, and so we ask various questions. So, for example, if we click on Metaverse, we ask people questions. Do you think the NFT and Metaverse are the same thing? So if people answer yes, they get certain explanations. If they click on no, they get some other explanations. So the idea is to explain to cultural professionals that some of these innovations have huge consequences, and it's best to take into account all of these factors before making a choice. Okay, so once again, all of these resources are available, and we've had some good results from our first round. We're getting good feedback from the participants. 84% said they would be interested in a second edition, so that's very encouraging. We provide actionable tools, and they are accessible. And then there are forums for discussion. A lot of the participants began to talk more to each other. So beyond the strict confines of our methodology. And we also put together a very good training program. We rationalized our resources. So with 21 institutions participating, it means that the investment in time and money is rationalized, because the tools that emerge from that can be used by all. And so we really want to thank the Shift Project for their contribution to this project, and we really want to thank the people from the Ministry of Culture as well. And we, in particular, offered a training for some of the higher officials of the Ministry of Culture about what we were doing. So, thanks to the success of that first round, well, we're launching into a second group that we hope to start in March, covering a period of 9 months with a break in the summer, of course. So the methodology will be the same. We'll be working with professionals from museums, of course, as usual, but also the performing arts, because it's important to work with a broad variety of professionals. And the themes will be perhaps a bit different, entering some new areas around digital archiving, for example, and virtual reality. So always with the same idea in mind, how to ensure a good visitor experience and the sharing of the heritage, but how. So, yes, that's important, but how can we do it in a sustainable manner? So that's the same guiding theme, and we'll be bringing in different experts as well, and still working in collaboration with the Ministry of Culture. And who will continue to support us in these projects. So there's a QR code. Please reach out to us. Give us your email address if you want us to contact you, or if you just want to sign up for our regular newsletter. And there's also a link to the prototypes if you would like to have a look at the white paper and see some of the other prototypes that we didn't present today. So you've got our emails on the screen and the link if you're interested in participating in the next round. So everything is on the Creative Commons and the Restitution as well. It explains all of the work that has been done and that will be done. And so if you have any questions, we're here, but we don't want to interfere with the next round table. Do we have time for questions now? Thank you so much.